Hi, this is Rodney from helpingyoulearnspanish.com, and I'm here in La Habana, Cuba, on the famous malecón. Today I'm going to talk to you about some of the Spanish you'll hear in La Habana as a tourist. In fact, let's start with the word malecón. Malecón basically means boardwalk, and it's not always a boardwalk in the traditional sense as you might know it. But a malecón is anywhere where you can walk alongside the beach, the river, or any sort of body of water. In fact, in Cuba, el malecón is known as el sofá más grande del mundo, the largest sofa in the world. And why do they call it el sofá más grande del mundo? Well, this is a place where Cubans and tourists alike come out to socialize, enjoy the water, a nice cool breeze, exercise. At night and on the weekends, you'll hear people playing music, dancing, generally just having a good time. So now let's talk about a very common greeting that you'll hear here in La Habana, and I imagine in toda la isla, all over the island. Que bolá, aseré, or aseré, que bolá. Doesn't matter which order those come in, but basically those mean what's up, how's it going. It's the Cuban way of saying what's up. Aseré actually means dude or perhaps friend, something along those lines, and que bolá would be the what's up. All right, now let's talk a little bit about money here in Cuba. Right? Dinero, or sometimes you hear divisa. But Cuba has two currencies. One of them is called the CUC, which is the Cuban Convertible Peso. The abbreviation in English is CUC, sometimes heard as CUC, but I think most commonly you'll hear it as CUC. The other currency, which is the Moneda nacional, the national currency, is known as CUP, CUP, or CUP. I'll talk more about those currencies on the blog, which is helpingyoulearnspanish.com, and I'll leave that link below. But for now, yes, there are two currencies you'll need to be aware of. They are not equivalent. So where do you get these currencies, right? You can exchange money. They don't call the currency exchanges here casas de cambio, which you may or may not be familiar with. Rather, they call them cadecas. A cadeca is, again, where you exchange your money here in Cuba. And travelers tip, never exchange your money on the street. But again, I'll talk more about exchanging money on the blog. Next, let's move on to transportation. There are various methods of transportation in Cuba. One of the most interesting is what's known as an Almendron or almendrones. Talk about them plurally. An Almendron is a taxi, but not just any taxi. It's one of the old classic cars from the 50s or 60s. Clearly, you don't see a lot of those in the United States, but they're all over here in Cuba. Essentially, an Almendron is like a colectivo. A colectivo is a type of taxi in where you share a ride with multiple passengers. You'll also have the guagua here in Cuba, and if you don't know what a guagua is, in fact, if you just heard that noise, that was a guagua that just stopped outside of the camera view here. But a guagua is known as it's what they call a bus. You'll also hear the word guagua used for bus in Puerto Rico. In fact, the term guagua, actually I believe in the Dominican Republic as well. It's a very common term in the Caribbean islands that speak Spanish. Going back to the almendrones, the taxi driver, the taxista, of a almendron is actually known here locally as a botero. So los boteros are the taxistas. And if you are taking a taxi from one place to another, that would be known as ir boteando. And I'll have more information about that on the blog as well. The next thing I want to talk about is where to stay in Cuba. There are lots of hotels and things here in Cuba where you can stay. Many of them are very nice, but they're also extremely expensive. Anywhere from probably $150, $200 and up. So many people decide to stay in what's called a casa particular. And if you think of a casa particular, it's really essentially an Airbnb where Cubans rent out rooms or apartments or even their houses to foreigners. So next, let's talk about what's called a paladar. A paladar is a restaurant, essentially. It's an independently owned restaurant by an individual Cuban or a Cuban family. For those of you who don't know, essentially the Cuban government owns almost literally everything. Every type of business imaginable here is primarily owned by the government. Cubans are, however, allowed to own paladares, which, as I said, are independently owned restaurants. If you're accustomed to any type of restaurant Spanish, that's all pretty much the same, except for one word that stood out to me, which is hava or javita, which is surprisingly a bolsa or a bag. So if you ask for your food to go and you ask for a bag to go with it, they will give you a hava. And speaking of that, you'll actually be charged for that hava. That's it. That wraps up pretty much everything. As a tourist, that's the Spanish you're going to be exposed to most frequently. Cuban Spanish is very rich in unique words and phrases, but I'll cover some more of those in the blog. And that's it. I'm signing off for now, again from the beautiful Habana, Cuba. And I will talk to you later. Ciao, and nos vemos.
Aunque tú me has echado en el abandono, aunque ya han muerto todas mis emociones, en vez de maldecirte conjunto en cono, en mis sueños te como, en mis sueños te como de bendiciones, sufro la inmensa pena de nuestra vida. Siento el dolor profundo de tu partida.